Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. It's Wade T. Lightheart from the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast, and I am super pumped. Yes, folks, it's the best day ever. This is the best day ever because we have the legend himself, David Wolfe, probably the most iconic living master of health, longevity, superfood. For those who don't know, he's campaigned for over 30 years and has been involved in so many different things. Number one, he's planted over 1 million trees through his foundation, I think it is. He's kind of like the modern day Johnny Appleseed. He's got an extraordinary history, really launched the whole superfood raw movement, or relaunched it, I should say. It was kind of an idea way back in the day. Written a pile of books, but more importantly, I think everybody in the health industry has probably can take their mind back or take themselves to a moment in the last 10, 15, 20, 25 years where they were at a small, medium, or large lecture with David Wolfe, and some kind of electric transmission came through to them and changed the course of your life. So, David, you've probably changed the course of more people's lives than anybody in the health food industry or the health awareness or longevity community today. And you've probably traveled more miles than anybody in the industry. I mean, you were perpetually on the road for 3 years. And now you've taken, you were kind of away for a little bit. I didn't know what was going on. You were kind of on some shamanic mission or whatever it is. We'll find out a little bit about that. But what's going on with you today? Welcome to the show. It's so great to have you.
Oh man, I'm so glad it's you. I heard about this show and Angela set this up. She's been my business partner for like 25 years. And then I got your products. I was like, oh, these are awesome products. And then seeing you, I'm like, oh, now it all makes sense. So great to see you, bro. You look great as ever. And I've been on the road for 26 years straight. And so this whole thing that's going on right now has actually gotten me off the road for the first time in 26 years. My claim to fame is I've been 26 years traveling where I have not been in one place for more than 4 weeks or a month.
Wow.
And so I'm home for 7 weeks. It's the first time it's ever happened in my adult life.
What's that? That's kind of shocking. What's that like?
It's the best ever. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen with our travel industry. I'm not sure what's going to happen with how this is all going to pan out, but I feel like I did it. I'm good. I don't need to go anywhere. I'm good. So either way, I'm okay. And I'm really happy to be home, and I'm really able to dig into many, many projects that I had, basically, set up here. And then for the one day in the future when I'd be here more often, and now I'm doing them every day. I'm getting them done. It's so cool.
Super cool. For those who might not be familiar with your history, can you give a little bit of background about, I love the history of kind of growing up in kind of New Jersey and the doctors.
New Jersey, yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that, and what was the aha moment, if you will, where you decided that you were going to dedicate your life to this message and this mission, which nobody's really committed to that level of depth that you have.
Well, I've been around for a long time. So, it started in 1970 when I was born, and, both my parents are doctors. My dad's office, I recently went and photographed all the images of my dad's old office, me and my brothers and my dad in front of his office when we were like 4 or 5 years old. My brother, I think he was 1 or 2 or something like that. And just to have that, because I'm going to start putting that into my social media a little bit more. And so I was born into a doctor's family, both my mom and dad. And so there's things that are there's a phrase that I think is appropriate here. There's an old Roman phrase, and it says, those who deny their destiny will be dragged by the fates, and those who align with their destiny will be carried on the wings of fate. And I was like, that was like me, because all my life I was like, I don't want nothing to do with healing medicine, anything like that, when I was a little kid. But I was still very much into health food. I was, when we had our little gang, as kids, and we were like 14, 15, 16, we're like, no one's allowed to have candy. We'd rip the candy right out of our friend's mouth. I mean, it was, so we had that little thing there. But it started for me, I think, with the trees and the tree planting and growing stuff. When I was 5, I used to renegade plant pine trees in my neighborhood. And that eventually I became a fanatical planter. And then eventually that rolled into my fruit tree planting foundation, which since 2002, we've planted 1 million trees in the world.
That's
So
amazing. I had a stint planting. I put 38,000 trees into the ground one year at a college, and I feel really good because I feel it's just helped my environmental impact. But tell us more about how you transit it. Kind of from that kind of breaking out of that's when you're with medical parents and you're kind of down and it's kind of it's maybe a more rigid path, and you're obviously super intelligent. It's kind of like, well, this is the way you should go, but somehow you were able to kind of like break past that.
Circumvent it somehow. That's the thing about destiny. So what happened is that when I was at university, UC Santa Barbara, I went from getting like C's to straight A's by one thing. I used to go to the library and get those success tapes. And there was one bit of advice in there that it took me to straight A's, just like that. And I was always a straight A student, leading up to university. But when I got into university, it was like parties and, I didn't really care as much, whatever. How that goes. Anyway, so this piece of advice was connect what you're doing. Let's say you're studying, I don't know, Plato, and connect Plato to a thing that you love. So when you write the papers, think of something you love. So at that time, I love surfing. So then all your analogies, the whole paper becomes about surfing and Plato.
Wow.
And that took me to straight A's instantly. People the teacher's assistants would contact me. They'd be like, "How this is so fun to read. Like, what's going on here?" And that's it. That was the whole secret. So one day after I got out of university, I took a year off. It was a lot. It was a lot of work, very intense. And I ended up going to like home. I stayed with my mom and lived there for a year. And then towards the end of that year, one night I had a vision. It just struck me of what I was to do with my life. And, like Jack Kerouac wrote in his book On the Road, he said, "Those who don't listen to a vision are damn fools." And I had a vision one night, an inexplicable vision, and said, "You're going to do this." And I'm like, and it lined up. I was like, I love public speaking. I love health. I love the whole focus of what's going on here. I love everything. It just all came together so that I could put everything that I'm into and all that I love in one place.
It's beautiful.
And from that moment, I never looked back, even though I did go through 4 years of law school during that time. And I did graduate from law school, even though I was traveling, doing health shows and everything. I'd come back and I'd be like, probably hope I make it, man. I hope I pass this test. But again, that trick of connecting what you love to whatever it is, the contract law, whatever it was. And then in 1998, I graduated law school, and I just never looked back. I never really wanted to have anything to do with law again, and went 100% into superfood nutrition, raw foods, fasting, all that stuff.
Well, one of the things I find interesting kind of from that perspective is, of course, you've talked a lot about the laws of natures in your talks as well, and understanding the structure, that there are rules and regulations to the universal things that are kind of, we have to discover and uncover. And one of the things we share a friendship with, God bless his soul, David Carmos.
Oh,
man.
And
yeah, beautiful man who had a big influence on me with his work with the Essenes. And I know that you're deeply integrated with that kind of spiritual health philosophy that was so discovered. I think that's a part a lot of people don't know about these uncovered truths. Any insights that you've garnered from that, or that that have influenced kind of your perspective? Because you always have such it's like a very top-down perspective before you get into what particularly you're talking about on a topic that day.
Yeah, well, I think definitely I'm always bringing a spiritual message. My message is spirit first for sure. My message is God first, or source first, or nature first, whatever your interpretation of that word is, or higher power, or, higher self, whatever, first. And so, through my work with the Essenes, there has been things. It's so amazing, man. I'm so lucky, and so are you, that we got that education young. Because now that I'm 50, I'm looking back and going, oh, thank God they taught me how to fast. Thank God they taught me how to eat. thank God those great teachers, the Paul Braggs of the world, the David Carmoses of the world, the Sean Millers of the world. You remember Sean Miller? Edmund Bordeaux-Zeke and his body of work, and those wonderful Essene Gospels of Peace. And, the importance of the Essenes, Dr. Gabriel Cousins, what he taught me. And now it all comes back to, and it bore fruit. It's really amazing. So it is, ultimately I did, I grew up very much in the sciences, but later as I got deeper into it, I realized, this isn't legit. This is what we call scientism. Mm-hmm. Which is at the depth of science, they're really trying to avoid the scientific method because they don't want.
Which is ironic.
It's very ironic.
You talk to some of the most influential kind of what I would say thinkers in that realm, and almost all of them says the same thing, and that is that real science has stopped progressing. Whether you're listening to Eric Weinstein, whether you're listening to another former friend of ours, Patrick Flanagan, or you're talking with various experts who are really getting breakthroughs, but they're being suppressed by the people who have some investment in their position, which is now being disproven or whatever. And it's
right.
Really...
You got it. Well said. Yeah. We call that scientism, which is the scientific. It's not really the scientific establishment. It's the scientific monopoly. And they're like, we can't have anything coming in here that could violate what we've said. And so all of that has helped fit me back into the Essene teachings. And I love the Essene teachings because one is you don't proselytize. You recognize yourself as an Essene, and that's it. Right. So there's no agenda with that. And then you come from a place of teaching, the great Essene teachings, whether it's fasting, whether it's solitude, whether it's prayer, whether it's meditation, whether it's raw foods, whether it's sprouting, fill in the blank, right relationship, right livelihood, walks in nature, whatever it is. And you just come from that, and people who are open to it, wonderful. They're open to it. Okay, cool. But, it is interesting getting into the bigger population as I got huge with Nutribullet and Facebook, just what kind of resistance we're up against. It's intense.
Which kind of brings us kind of where we are today, right now. Of course, we're under this, I don't know what you want to call it, maybe
medical science. I'll call it medical scientism. That's what it is. It's medical scientism.
To me, I feel like we're in the greatest hoax ever exerted upon humanity. But what would you say with your talks around the world? Because you've been kind of seeing actually generations coming into the conversation over the course of your career. What do you think is the perspective that's missing today, or the component today that is so critical that people are out there searching for something, they want something, and they're trying to get something, they're trying to do what, particularly related to health? What are you seeing, and what do you think is where people need to kind of get led out of the wilderness of this scientism or, public perception or whatever?
But one of the great things that's happening is that this next generation, the millennials or whatever you want to call them, they're super hip on the message that I have. They really are. And I'm very hopeful about that group. And I just see that on Instagram, like the amount of trolling that I would get with the older community was much greater. The younger group they're not really involved in that old style of thinking. I guess it's probably the best way to say it. So that's very promising. So there's great hope there. And then what they're wondering is like, wait, what do? I want to get to the magical reality. How do I get there? And so what we're doing is we're providing bridges to nature. And one of the great bridges is raw foods. One of the great bridges is sprouting. One of the great bridges is growing your own food and experimenting with gardening. And to that message, people are they're sucking it up. They love it. The fasting message has never been stronger. Can you believe it? We broke through with this, the whole, what do they call we do the old school fasting, the water fasting, that kind of thing. But what's the thing when you
intermittent fasting?
Intermittent fasting.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm doing alternate day right now. So I do 12 hours of eating, then 36 hours of fasting, 12 hours of eating, 36 on the cycle.
Oh, good job.
Which has really been fun for someone up in their years as I am. It's a great one for guys.
That's really good. I'm glad to hear that. And so that's broken through for us. So it just seems like everything is just kind of set up with the next generation. They're all ready to go, and they're marching in line, ready to go, and very excited about what's happening. And I'm just very, very excited about that group and inspired. With the older generation, it's that old phrase where it says, I think it was Blaise Pascal, the great mathematician. He said, the old ideas are not overturned. It's the people with them die off.
That's so true.
A little bit of that's happening, and we're kind of rushing in there to just stay on the cutting edge with that young group and give them what they want. And man, are we having fun. It is so fun, even in spite of all the insanity that's going on. I get up every morning. I was up at 4 this morning, just like you. We're very similar like that. Just inspired and ready to rock and roll and punching out memes and content and just videos. And it was so fun.
That's one, I think, of the big advantages today. It's kind of like a catch-22 with technology, is that where there's such an accessibility to information or an accessibility to excellence, but there's also the same thing with, accessibility to redundance and stupidity and that sort of, what I mean? So how do you think, or why do you think younger people are finding you today? Or how do you suggest people navigate the milieu between dogmatic thinking with real innovative, life enhancing practices, given the proliferation of digital information?
I think one of the best ways to do that is to curate your feed. It's a really good word, curate your feed. So, for example, your Instagram feed, don't have anything coming on there that's devaluing you. That's not, like, there shouldn't be anything in your feed that isn't totally inspiring you, totally helping you, supporting you, giving you tips, giving you ideas, giving you health ideas, business ideas, friendship ideas, relationship ideas that are positive and empowering. We've never had a better opportunity to have that. And so what I do on my thing is even, so then you have people who you have to follow because they're like friends or family. But I found out on Instagram, you could actually mute them so their stuff doesn't show up, but you're still following them. So they're okay. You know what I mean? They're not freaking out at you.
You've met your digital social responsibilities because you're still following them, but it's just not permeating into the gray matter so that you pick up some bad habits or bad thinking or whatever.
Yeah. Or just, some ideas that are just kind of old school. Don't need to go over those anymore. Anyway, so curating your feed is a very good strategy. Another very important strategy, and we've been teaching this for the better part of over 15 years in our superhero training, which is you've got to get at least one measured hour in nature. One measured hour in nature. That is so important every day. And when I say measured, because I know what happens with people. They say, oh, I'll go out and walk the dog. Next, it's a 40-minute walk. It needs to be an hour.
Right.
An hour at least.
And one of the things I think you're also very famous for kind of bringing to it is the components of actually getting your feet on the ground in nature and grounding in this component. Can you talk about, that's awesome. I love it. I love the unfilteredness. Can you talk about, relate it to this nature thing, because people are locked down and you see the mental health challenges really scaling up, and there's a lot of people suffering from anxiety, and we both know how anxiety reducing it is, but just going for a walk in nature, or being by the ocean, or being in the forest, or being on the beach or the desert, or whatever happens to find yourself. What is that relationship between the connection of nature or putting your skin to the ground? What have you found or discovered with that's so key? Because I think there's two aspects. I'll let your comment first.
Okay. So this has been a huge area of research for me in the last 10 years, but it really started probably at some point in my book reading. I came across The Ion Effect, which is a wonderful book. And it talked about in Southern California, they have the Santa Anas that come in the late summer that takes that hot air from the desert and pushes it out towards the beach. Normally it's the weather comes from the west to the east and, moves towards the desert from the ocean, but that's week or two, it comes the other way. And that's just, it changes the ions, the positively charged ions in the atmosphere from about 3 out of every 9 to 5 out of every 9, and radically changes behavior, as research showed. Now, these ions, either negative or positive is one way to understand them, are all around us. So the earth itself is negatively charged. So negatively charged ions come from the earth, especially in places like beaches, waterfalls, campfires, small candle fires. Those are emitters of negative ions and concentrates of them, and cold water and cold oceans in particular. And then the atmosphere itself is positively charged. And if the atmosphere becomes too overtly positively charged, that's when we start having like, a little bit of changes in behavior. People get a little flustered, and that's that Santa Ana condition. We can go all over the world. The Chinooks of Calgary is another one. There's another one I'm thinking in Western Australia, in Perth, where the wind changes direction and starts pushing out from the desert towards Perth and the ocean. All these different ecosystems have it. Anyway, this is something that I've had to learn from my years of, surfing in Southern California, that we would just naturally, our natural inclination was when we had Santa Ana's, to get to the beach and get surfing, because then you're saturated in the negative ions versus the positive, which disturbs us. Now, all this electrical equipment we have around us, including electrical wires, kicks off too much positive charge, or static electricity, basically. And so I'm always aware of this, very intimately aware of this. So even right here under my feet, I'm wearing, I've got a grounding pad. And you remember this stuff. So this is connected to the ground wire of my building here. And so that negative charge pushes up from the earth into me through this right here and kills the static electricity, gives me more negative charge. Now that has a very profound effect on our ideas, on our consistency of work. So if you're not grounded, if you're just in an office and not electrically grounded, the only time good ideas come is usually when you're in the shower, because then you're electrically grounded. When you turn that shower on, especially a cold shower, all of a sudden you go, oh, I've got the answer. I got it. That kind of stuff. So what I've been able to do is really manage that understanding to the point where, like, for example, every single day here, I barefoot walk to the lake over here and go swimming naked in the lake. Ice cold. I mean, it snowed this morning. It'll be ice cold this morning. And just every day we've been doing that for the last month, ever since it melted, and just disciplining yourself, because the cold water pushes off that positive electricity. So you just get saturated in the negative ions. It's all over all your skin. That's why you got to, you can wear a bathing suit, but I go naked because it's just a little bit better. And it clears off all the stuff, the electromagnetic storms that we call emotional instability, too much workload, confusion. That stuff is in part electromagnetic. There's no question about it. And when you get your head underneath that cold water, then you go, oh, it's all gone, just like that. And so that's a practice and a discipline that I learned over the years from the research on negative ions versus positive ions. And you want those negative free ions that are coming from waterfalls, coming from cold water, coming from the earth itself, especially when you only really get it when you get that skin to skin contact.
I love it. It is so powerful. And we're starting to see trends of people since we're in this positively charged ionic bath continuously all the time, that there seems to be driving more awareness, to get connecting with nature, to doing these, cold water plunges, to getting your feet on the ground, to grounding, and then the technology that goes with it. So I want to switch gears a little bit. So what do you think, because you're such, you kind of came to age, I think, about talking about health and longevity. What do you feel are the key elements that people, like the absolute laws, if you will, the must-dos if you want to live, as I say, you want to live long and you want to live strong while you live long? What do you think, or what have you found? Because I know you've researched everything. I mean, we could go on with a rainbow of things, but what are the things that people need to say, this is a must, this is a have to?
Number one is spiritual connection to source, connection to God, connection to creator. And that's number one, because in our lifetime, like I've got my cousin right now who didn't do the things that we love and, ate junk food and smoked cigarettes and did all kinds of drugs, all kinds of stuff. He's in a hospital right now in San Diego. He had a stroke. And yeah, it's really troubling because I can't see him. I can't even get down there because I can't get into the hospital due to what's going on. It's gnarly. And so, when I think about, his case, I'm like, one of the main challenges in his life has been, he hasn't had that connection to source, that connection to God. He didn't get that peace. And so I know what it's done to him, how it's led him to drugs or alcohol or escapism or whatever. And so that's number one. And also, knowing from my experience of kind of seeing parallel, lives like his and other people I know who've turned to drugs and alcohol, just knowing that, inside deep down, there is peace, and inside deep down, there is happiness, no matter what else is going on around us, right? That is such a key teaching that I picked up from, and I have to say, I do want to mention this, going to see the great yogis, actually being in their presence, has had a profound impact on me.
I can share the same thing with myself. That's been the one piece that kind of just opens up perspective. You can go through almost anything if you have that. And if you don't have it, no matter how good your life is, there's always something missing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so your happiness has to come from within, and your peace and connection to source has to come from within. And I do think that seeking out people who are spiritual masters, these great gurus, I remember seeing, I think his name was Sant Thakar Singh. And the guy didn't sleep. He didn't sleep for months, and he would just meditate nonstop. And so they'd bring him up in front of the audience, and he'd meditate, and he'd be like, "Who's ready to drop drugs and alcohol right now?" And people would raise their hand and go, "I'm done. That's it. I'm done with it." And just his presence and his energy, even today, still affects me. And I was like, "Oh, this dude is so connected to source. He never is apart from it." So that's number one. Number two is fasting and prayer. So those two together, the Bible mentions those two together. The Essene teachings mentions those two together numerous times. I think in the Bible it's mentioned, I used to know the exact number. It's like 77 times together, right. Fasting and prayer. Yeah. That's a big one. So the best thing to do is nothing.
Yeah, which is just so shocking, right? It's like, yeah, go within and just stop putting stuff in and see what emerges, right?
That's it. So doing nothing has been a wonderful teaching, and that's why I like fasting so much. It's just such a great feeling. Just nothing is better for pain. Like, don't do anything, just be with it. Okay, so then I'd say beyond that, then we got to get into a conversation about relationships and nutrition. So relationships are very key, because the stronger your relationships are, the longer you're going to live. For example, we know from placebo research that, let's say somebody gets a breast cancer diagnosis and they come home and they're supported by their family, or they have a pet that loves them, their chances of survival are 2 or 3 times higher. I mean, that's really substantial. That's like amazing. Yes. If you really think about that, like, wow, that's a profound effect. And then in addition, and on top of that, if we start putting nutrition in so that we're not toxifying ourselves, but we're actually getting goodies in, like this is water and sea buckthorn extract from our sea buckthorns in the front yard here. And, it's just so wonderful to be able to get your own local nutrition in, your local water. I'm a spring water hunter. I really recommend that for people. It's one of those things that connects you to your local ecosystem. Wonderful practice to have. I've hunted over 350 springs on 5 continents. So
I've had this spring water from your place up in Ontario. Some guys brought it to me, which is extraordinary. And I think that was one of the decisions why you got that place, was it not?
That's right. Yeah, because people are like, people come after me and they're like, "You're just doing cold water dips because Wim Hof." I'm like, dude, I love Wim Hof and we're friends, but that's not why I'm doing it. It's because I've been doing it. That's why I moved to Ontario 15 years ago. I've been doing it all along, as you know, and I just absolutely love the feeling of it. I'm so glad that Wim Hof popularized it. What an amazing thing. And by the way, that's another piece of the puzzle too, is swimming, getting into the water. So yeah, you want to drink the water for sure, but also connecting to the local waters around you doesn't mean just drinking it. It also means going for swims in that ocean, getting in that cold ocean all seasons, even in the middle of winter, and just feel what that exhilaration is like. And that exhilaration is part of life. I mean, that's what challenges your system. This is what Wim Hof has showed. It challenges your system. It's hormesis, and it stretches you, and then you bend to that new self.
Yeah,
so that's really fun.
Beautifully said. I know from research they've suggested that water has 440,000 information panels of storage. So the reason you can remember your keys or your name or where your address is has a lot with the principles of water. And of course, we have another mutual friend, Patrick Flanagan, who was he edited the chapter I did on water in one of my books, and it was very interesting to always sit with these folks who had studied these things for years. But when you talk about getting into water, or the information, if we see food as information, fruits, vegetables, that combination of amino acids, that combination of minerals, and that substrate of water programs it in a certain way, and it's giving information to your body. And I remember one of your talks years ago when I was early in my career, and I remember you talking about information sources from food and the components that are inside that. It's lovely. What's really great is, you're walking the walk. You've been practicing these principles for years, and now second and third generations are gravitating the message even more so today. What are some other elements beyond that that you think that's really critical, and what are you up to today, particularly you're focusing on? We talked a little bit beforehand. I'll kind of cue you up on that.
I'm a big fan of Rudolf Steiner, and over the years of all the books I've read, and I have made it a lifestyle to read thousands of books. I finally landed on Rudolf Steiner, and I was like, this dude is just the depth. I mean, he left behind 1 million pages of material. 1 million pages. And
for those who want to dive a little bit more into this, should refer to our friend Paul Chek, and you guys about 45 minutes into your conversation got into Rudolf Steiner, and it's like Paul went on such a rant about Steiner. I'm like, okay, let's hear David's. I was waiting for David to step in, because not a lot of people know these masters who have shared so much wisdom that's applicable, will be applicable 1,000 years from now as it is today. So what are some other key elements that you feel is critical?
So from Steiner really taught me a really interesting principle, and that is when you're creating, you're in the cosmic center of all. You're all undue influences are relieved when you're in the moment of creation. So being involved in creating, for example, I love creating in the yard. I love creating little spots to grow things, and gardens, and planting, and creating soils, and so that when I'm in that moment, there's nothing, I don't need to do anything else. I'm in the best ever. That's the best ever. And so that's a big one, is being in creation. So whatever your thing is, let's say somebody's an artist, let's say somebody is where they create is at work. Good. Okay, cool. Stay in the creative center, and you will never be lost in this world. So I think that's a big principle of longevity as well, right there. And then while we're on that, just because I did mention gardening, a big thing is not only eating the wonderful raw foods and the foods from nature and wild food, but also growing it yourself, which so many people today are so interested in doing that. I mean, they really are so interested. I'm absolutely impressed with, when they do an Instagram live or something, how many people are like goggle-eyed. They're like, what's that? What's that? And just one thing after another. Oh, here's an aronia berry. Okay, here's a sea buckthorn. Here's what this looks like. Here's what that looks like. And people they can't get enough of it. It's just awesome. So I'm really excited about that group finally getting on the land. These kids are like 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So gardening and having your feet and hands in the soil is another big principle. And then, of course, there's always the yoga. I mean, you can see right back there, you can see my yoga swing. See that right there?
Yes.
And so there's, always the yoga. I got to start getting back in that thing. I basically broke both my legs in the last 3 years. So
wow.
Yeah.
What happened?
Just crazy stuff, going too much, just trying to squeeze 3 lives into one.
Right. And why not?
Why not? But I tell you why not now. Right. You could hurt yourself. And I did hurt myself pretty badly. And this last one's been like 6 months. I'm up and walking again, no problem, but I can't run yet. So I'm still at that stage. So now I'm at the point where I can climb into that swing, and that's going to be my next little yoga practice, getting back to that stuff. So that's a big one. And one of the reasons why I bring the yoga in, especially that thing, is the inversions, getting inverted, getting upside down. So your head and your heart is below your hips. That's so key. That's one of the best teachings of all longevity. What you're doing is you're inverting the forces. You're taking gravity. I got so much flack for this, but this is so useful to people. You take gravity, which is ultimately a toxin, right? It's crunching us down, turning us into Yoda, essentially. And you're flipping it around, and you're using it to elongate and stretch your spine out. It's creating traction. And that's really one of the best hacks there is. And yoga's been on that from the beginning. It's all about inversions.
Okay. They've only been doing that for 10,000 years or something.
Maybe they learned something. I don't know.
That's so great. Let's talk about a topic that I think is catching fire, but there's also a lot of disinformation out there, and that's detox. And I see a lot of people talking about detox diets, this fad, this thing or whatever. And there's just a smorgasbord of ideas and stuff. And oftentimes what happens is people get confused because there's too many different things or conflicting information or whatever. I'd like for you to maybe spend a little time for our listeners, because you're such an expert in this area, is to kind of flesh out what are the main principles of detox, who and when should they do it, that maybe the different types of detox, the right detox at the right time, how to go into it, how to come out of it, how not to screw yourself up, and how to take advantages. I'd like to kind of really open the door up for you to kind of share your wisdom around kind of like the A to Z, as concisely as possible, as only you can share with us, of what you've learned about detox and what people need to know about detox so they can navigate this really critical element of health and longevity.
Thank you for that. Number one thing about detox is go at your pace. Go at a pace that's uncomfortable for you, but not so uncomfortable that you get into territory you don't know what to do. Most of us are coming from a very toxic situation where we're breathing toxic air, water, and food, and it's just around us all the time, and we're saturated in it. And we're seeing now that, more and more, there's more and more interest, but we're more and more toxic. So we have to go slow. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go take the basic steps, like go organic, do a heavy metal detox, which means a lot of sweating, right? Get in that sauna over there and do some sweating. And also taking the chelators. So you just go in gentle. So let me tell you what I've learned over the years is not to get too complicated, but keep it simple. The number one binder and chelator that's been with the history of humanity longer than anything else, is really two of them, and I like them in an 80-20 ratio, is activated charcoal and clay. Mm-hmm. And that combination of those two is pretty much unbeatable as detoxifiers and binders, especially with consistent use. So, I do my charcoal. I have a container. This is all filled with charcoal capsules. And every day I do some of these guys. But if you're just new to all this, when you get up in the morning, drink your water and take one of these, like a 440 milligram capsule of activated charcoal, and just start the process. Now, this is shocking, Wayne. You're going to dig this. I don't know if you know this. This came to me through a roundabout series of investigations that finally landed me on this discovery. The number one substance that people can take, the number one substance in animal research that's ever been found to increase longevity in terms of something you could actually ingest, is activated charcoal by far.
Can you share with people what activated charcoal is actually doing in your body? What's it responsible for?
Yes, and by the way, it's a great first step. If you're really, really new, this is such a great first step. Activated charcoal is a drawing agent, but it doesn't absorb like a sponge. It adsorbs with a D, which is more like an electromagnetic phenomenon. It's more like magnets sticking to your fridge. So when you take the charcoal, and imagine just taking a giant magnet, you just swallowed a big magnet, and all those positively charged molecules in there, the mercury, the leads, the formaldehyde, the plastics, they get pulled to the charcoal through your intestines mostly. That's where most of the action is, through a process that's called interstitial dialysis. And we've heard that term before, dialysis. That's like kidney filtering, isn't it? And so then you go, wait a second, what's interstitial dialysis? It's a natural filtering process that activated charcoal activates in your body, where it draws the toxins off your blood through the intestinal villi the other way, right? Because normally your body's absorbing to the portal vein and then to the liver.
Just like the reversing the ions with the Santa Ana winds, you can actually do this in your internal, as it is, above, so it is below.
And it's so wonderful. And so people ask me, okay, what do you mean like charcoal? Like, can I just like burn like wood and then eat it? And the answer is yeah. If it's an edible wood like birch or maple, sure, you could just charcoal it in a fire and eat it. But I'd recommend the activated charcoals. It's cleaner and it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more efficient in the sense that it's been micronized and broken down, so it has more surface area. A typical capsule of activated charcoal can absorb between 100 and 200 times its own weight in toxins.
Wow,
so
that's incredible.
That's really high. So you don't need more than one capsule a day to start, for sure. Just if you're going on a health kick, just start with that in the morning with your water. Make sure you drink your water every morning. I put a little bit of sea salt in my water too for the electrolytes. I think you're a big fan of that as well. Yep. And those three together with lemon, wonderful. Lemon, water, a little bit of sea salt, a little bit of activated charcoal. Excellent way to start your day.
I mean,
best ever.
And let's talk about where the clay comes in, like bentonite clay, that type of thing. So can you explain what clay is all about, what it does in your body, and how it works within a detox program?
Okay, so there are many different clays out there. I like the red clays and the white clays. Some white clays are calcium based. Some white clays or gray clays are more aluminum based, but it's not the kind of, it's like aluminum as it appears naturally in the environment. It's not like an aluminum can.
Yes.
And then the red clays are rich in iron. So it depends on your metabolism. I run a little bit hot. I'm a little pitta, so if I do red clays, it can kind of get me fiery. But if
Yep.
I do white clays, it kind of calms me down. And you literally would just take a capsule of clay or a little bit of clay powder, and you can blend it into a drink. Really easy. That's a really good way to do it when you're doing a detox. So in the morning, you're going to do the activated charcoal. But let's say you're going into your day and you're like, okay, I'm doing this fast. I'm going to do liquids. You want to get some bulking agent binder in there too, and that's where the clay can come in. So you can just open up a capsule of clay or two, or you can get a little jar of clay. It's all powdered, and just add that powder into your whatever you're drinking, even just water if you want to, and then drink that in, and you get the same kind of gentle drawing power as the activated charcoal. They work really well together. The typical history of pharmaceuticals in Europe would mix about 80% activated charcoal with about 20% clay. That product was available by Merck Pharmaceuticals for 100 years until just like last year they took it off.
Wow.
They actually had a clay and activated charcoal product on the market for like 100 years. And as this whole thing's gotten popular with clay and activated charcoal, they took it off. It's so weird. I mean, I look at that and go, is that a coincidence? What the heck is going on here?
Well, and do you think they were using that to kind of reduce some of the toxicity from the pharmaceutical agents that are out there, or was it for some other purpose?
I think it was a history of demand. Like, we've gotten further, as time has gone on, we've gotten further, especially with pharmaceutical companies, they just have gotten further and further away from nature. And now we're to the point where it's just medical tyranny. But back in the day, they actually had some, really interesting and neat products. For example, standardized willow extract, which today we call aspirin. And there was some, like hydrochloroquine or whatever, this chloroquine, which is quinine. That's been a standardized product in medicine for 70 years.
Yes.
So this stuff, there's 100 of them that are like that are like actually made out of natural products and standardized. And, some of them can be very, very valuable in acute situations and very useful. But the pharmaceutical industry is step by step tried to get rid of those. And the latest victim of that is activated charcoal clay, that combo product in their world. I mean, obviously we can get that in our world. So anyway, this detoxing with activated charcoal and clay in particular these are binders and drawing agents. So what they're doing is they're step by step, slowly but surely drawing off the toxic load off the body. They're intelligent medicines. That's another big one. I think you agree with me on this, that everything has intelligence. This whole idea that like, oh, that's dead, this is living, that's dead, that's living, just that whole concept, it's scientism. There's no proof of any of that at all. It's like the way I look at the world, everything's alive. Rocks are alive. I had this, let me tell you a crazy thing that happened the other day. We've been really into cedar and growing cedar. I've got some really interesting cedars coming here that I ordered recently. And it's been the dominant tree in my mind for this year in 2020. And I'm a big tree guy. And I was out in the yard the other day and I was just making some soil and my neighbors drove up and they're like, we hit this bird. We don't know what to do. We're giving it to you. And it was a grouse. It was a wild chicken from the forest. It's just like a chicken, but wild, right? Up here. And it was still warm. They just put it in my hand. I was like, oh my God, it's dead. And its neck was broken. They hit it in the car. And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do with this? And finally, after a long period of like, what am I going to do with this? This beautiful bird is now dead in my hands. I've got to respect it. And we got to do this right. And I was like, I don't want to just bury it. I mean, not everybody in this house is a vegetarian like me. And so I was like, this is definitely better meat than anything you could ever buy. It's been delivered into my hands. So I was like, let me see if I can, figure out how to do this thing like a chicken. I don't know. I'm a vegetarian. I don't know how to clean a chicken, any of it. But anyway, we did figure it out. But the first thing that happened is I cut into its gullet here. And this is the craziest thing. Wait, listen to this. When I got in, because they hold their food in a gullet here, right? So they take something and they'll swallow it and they'll leave it here and they'll bring it back to their nest and eat it later. There was 11 or 12 sprouted cedar seeds in its gullet.
Wow.
It tripped me out. After like an hour, I was like, oh my God, whoa. That's the magic of living in nature. That's it right there. Stuff like that happens. It's so shocking. It's such a hyper synchronicity. You're just like, whoa, all those seeds were delivered to me, sprouted with the tails coming out even. It was that crazy.
Wow.
I was like, whoa, cedar. I was just like, it was a tough one to take. I was like, this is crazy. So I planted them.
That's beautiful. One of the interesting things I find is as you kind of commit to these practices of detoxification and integrating with nature and spirit and these type of things, all of a sudden the amazing, magical, synchronistic component of the universe just kind of reveals itself on a perpetual basis. And I always find when I'm not in that space that somehow I've lost my connection. I've lost my awareness. It's time to like pull back and like, like pull back and go, okay, I'm off track here a little bit. That's kind of like my baseline is like, how much magic am I feeling on a day? And if I'm not feeling the magic, I know I'm out of balance.
That's well said, man. I mean, the way I do that, the way I typically measure that is if I'm catching the 11-11s, the 111s, the 333, the 222, the 1-2-3-4, the 1-2-3, or the 3-2-1. If I'm catching those times, I know I'm in the flow. But if I'm out a little, suddenly I look and it's like 11-12, I'll go, oh man, worst ever. Because I'm on 11-11. You know what I mean? Then I know that something's off. Right. And then yes. I'm like, I gotta get that synchronicity clock back together. But I will say this, being at home now for 7 weeks and 7+ weeks and not being on the road, that it's been up a little bit more. The synchronicity has been, it's been good. It has been really good. So a lot to be said for being connected to the land, a lot to be said for being at home. And even though we're kind of in this weird, stay at home thing, there's some great things you can do when you're at home that you don't get the chance to often. And man, take advantage of it right now.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip, rapid cheat meal relief. Research shows that cheat meals can actually be an effective way to boost your metabolism. One key weight loss hormone, leptin, can be increased by up to 30% following a cheat meal. The challenge with the cheat meals is that all those extra calories and lower food quality can be hard to digest, which means you could be totally sidelined with a food coma after big cheat meals. The solution is to take strong digestive enzymes like masszymes, which will help rapidly digest and break down the extra food. 3 to 5 capsules before or right after your cheat meal can make a huge difference in how you feel following the cheat meal. If it's a cheat day with multiple large meals, you might want to go up to 10 capsules or higher to help you power through all that food. To save 10% on masszymes, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and enter the code CHEAT10 at checkout.
So what are some other things on the detoxification conversation? So you kind of laid out a couple of the musts of the generalizations, taking your diet into a more natural, the healthier foods, the grown foods, the raw foods, that sort of stuff, adding in some charcoal and bentonite. Are those things that people can do all the time, or should they be spacing them out? What's your
we should try to go organic. We should try to get some clay and definitely charcoal. Charcoal's an easy one to get into our diet. We should definitely go to water, charcoal, sea salt, and lemon in the morning, first thing in the morning, get that in our body. And then what happens is when we come to those changes in the seasons, the equinoxes, the solstices, or in particular like full moon, like what's happening right now, then that's a really epic time to go for the cleanse and do something interesting. And so typically the really strong one is the spring one. And that
yes.
spring one, I try to for sure get a 20, I think this last one was 26 days that I really did some intense cleansing. But last year I was with Woody Harrelson. We went 55 days on our cleanse on that particular one and ended up in long water fast. I did a 12-day water fast with him. That was phenomenal. He's an awesome guy, by the way. We've been close friends for like 20 years, and we've done lots of cleansing together because that's whenever we get together, it's like, dude, it's time to start cleansing because he's not at work. I'm not at work. I was like, let's cleanse. And it's great. So that last one, the 55-day cleanse I did last year was the best cleanse I'd done in a very, very long time. And what we do there is we gradually bring the calories down. We bring the raw foods, for anybody who's new to that, we're going to bring you onto the raw foods and vegan foods. And then step by step, we're going to work you to a liquid diet. And then we're going to work you to right at about 2 weeks. Day 15 is once you've been doing really that 15 days with us, the parasite cleansing also. And we usually start with the parasite cleanse about a week before. So they do that for a week, then they keep doing it. Then they get into that week 2. They're going to bring those calories down. They go on more liquids. Week 3, it's full liquids and parasite cleansing. Then that 15th day of the official cleanse, it's really day 22 overall with the parasite cleansing. That's when we go to the water fast.
Right.
And then we do that for a week or longer. If you want to go 8 days, this guy was on the phone with, lost 31 pounds. He was on our cleanse and he'd never done anything like that before. And he was able to do 8-day water fast.
Wow. That's incredible.
It's incredible. The water fasting stories that I've been getting from people, because people go, I can't do it. And I was like, yes, you can. Just do it. Just follow me every day. We're going to do it together. We're doing it. It's so much easier together.
Yes.
And all of a sudden we're like, boom, here we're on day 1 of the water fast. Just hang in there. We're communicating every day on a chat, the whole group.
I think that's really a key aspect, because you kind of illustrated something like community equals accountability. It kind of leverages our innate tribal psychology, is that, well, I don't feel I can do that, but I'm not going to let David down. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be an outcast of the cleansing crew here, right? And then that can push you through those, what I would call those moments of weakness or those moments of doubt that emerges whenever you go when you go to that. And once you've gone through a few fasts, you kind of like, oh yeah, here it is, day 3. My body wants to go to, like it wants to run to Burger King or something. Can you share with our listeners some of the insights or some of the advantages that start to emerge, or some of the challenges? Like I noticed when I started to fast, I started with 1-day fasts and then 2 days and then 3 days. And then, eventually work myself up to a 10-day water fast every, I do that twice a year. But I built myself up to, what are some of the things that you've discovered in fasting, or some of the challenges that come up for people when they're engaging in this type of activity that's so important?
Well, number 1 is it's mental. It is so mental. It's all about your mental state. So the thing we're doing every day, and what I'm doing, with my texting with our group and stuff, is I'm always getting them mentally in the right place. Here, read this book. Oh, check out this video. Hey, let's focus on this. So, this is the thing. It's like what we focus on expands. And so as soon as somebody goes, oh my God, I really want that. Oh my God, I'm really hungry. As soon as they get caught up in that, we immediately go, hey, look over here. Look over here. And that's the wonderful thing about being on a chat group is that we can redirect the focus into other places. Then, as you go through day 1, day 2, day 3, once you get into that ketosis and that burning of the glycogen, all of a sudden day 4, you're like, whoa, this is easy. What's going on? And so we're just trying to get them into ketosis. That's really what it's about. So that they, all of a sudden the cravings are gone, and all of a sudden they go, oh, I don't really actually want that sugar. And then we start guiding them to hyper learning. Because when you're in that state, as you know, you can really intensely learn things and read and take in information. And where I'm at after all these years is that because I do this twice a year at least, I try to do even a third one, or I'm probably going to do a 4th one this year. Where I'm at is every one is another challenge for me. So this one, the latest one was, I'm just going to sit home and do my normal work as I would normally do and just not eat. And just do a normal water fast, but just do everything normal, like my normal workload. I'm not going to rest. I'm not going to do anything like that, which I don't recommend for new people. Definitely rest.
Yes.
Definitely rest. But I've been doing this a long time. So it's like, I have to challenge myself, each time. The last one that I did in the equinox for the autumn, in 2019, September, October 2019, that one was about doing my normal fast while traveling and doing events.
Wow, that's intense.
That was intense. I did a 6-hour event on the 4th day of a water fast. That was intense. I have to say, I was like, oh man, but just, somehow, when you're, how it is when you're fasting, you can just keep pulling on something. There's always extra in there. You're just like, keep pulling up in these resources. You're like, oh, there's more in there. And that gets us into, by the way, you know, the appropriate strategy for nutrition that I really like, the Taoist strategy, which is when you are eating, make sure you're nourishing yourself with Jing and longevity substances and herbs and wild food that give you more than just your daily nutrition requirements, or, you know, more than just the surface stuff, that are actually going deeper. You know, the Taoists call them the treasures, you know, Tao, or they would call it like Shen, which is the spiritual treasure, Jing, which is the primordial life force treasure, and then Qi, of course, is the way you mobilize your energy, which we all are familiar with, the Bruce Lee style stuff. And then, you know, when you put that all together, you develop will, where you can manifest better if you're nourishing yourself in all of those ways. So that's, you know, when people want to go deeper with me in a non-fasting environment, you know, then like with my inner circle or something, then we get into those kind of conversations. Like, here's, you know, chaga mushroom. Here's how you use it. Here's why it's a Jing substance. It's sitting on that tree right there for 20 years. All of a sudden, one day you come off, you break that thing off. How many times are you eating anything that's been there 20 years living?
Yeah, very.
You know what I'm, right? You know, stuff like that. So, you know, we get into that, like, why is it a longevity substance? Well, it's because that got that going on. And so there's many, many layers to all this, but the main thing today, I think for most of us, is detox isn't a good idea. It's a prerogative. We pretty much have to detox. And like you were saying, that tribal instinct comes in. So when we do it together, it's just easier. It's so much easier. It's impossible by yourself. You get together with other people, no problem. We got you.
You got some good points there on, particularly on kind of the long elements. And then how would someone maybe schedule mini detoxes or regular components throughout the year in between these kind of bigger pushes, if you will? How would you suggest or recommend, or things that they could use in order to enhance detoxification in the body?
Well, I always recommended activated charcoal. Another thing I recommend, and I actually have your enzymes right here, which, you know, I'm so stoked to have these right here.
Thanks.
Just getting on the enzymes more, lots of water, enzymes more, less food, skip a meal, skip 2 meals, do an all liquid day. But the best times usually come around the full moon on a weekend.
Right.
So, you know, this is the normal working environment that we're in, which we're not in right now, but when we get back to that, Friday, Saturday, Sunday is a really good time to just rest. And interesting, I do want to bring this up. One of the gals who's worked for me for over 10 years, she was having a lot of problems. And I was like, you know, I'm not going to mention her name, but it's like, you didn't do the cleanse with us, and you didn't do the fast with us, and you really need to do some cleansing, and you got to do it right now because it's still springtime. It's still good. You can still do this. She heard that message. You know, I kind of pepped her up a little bit. She did, I think, a couple days on liquids and then went right to water. She's on her 6th or 7th day on water right now. And guess what? All her symptoms went away.
It's super powerful. I was just talking with Oz Garcia the other day. We had him on the podcast, and that's how he got started. He got started in his whole health journey. He was a photographer in New York, and he had chronic migraines. His parents had chronic migraines, and he read Paul Bragg's Miracle of Fasting. I mean, amazing, right? And he said, yeah, I got a migraine, and I sat in a room for 2 days just drinking water, and it went away. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. How does this work? And that now, you know, 50 years later, he's a world-renowned health expert, and he incorporates fasting. So I think it is a really important component is, how do you we talked about going in, and we talked about the piece of, I think it's also just important, how do you come out of a detoxification experience? Because it's not like, you know, you run out and go eat the food that you just left behind, you know, 10, 12, 14 days ago. What do you do coming out of it? And what are some mistakes people make? And what are some, you know, again, some principles that people need to inquire or incorporate?
One of the things that I love about the messaging services that you can have on your phone is it allows you to go those extra days with people, but we don't tell them right up front. We're like, because, you know, it depends on how far they're going. You'd always have to come out of that cleanse. Generally, let's say you did a 2-week cleanse, you come out of it for a week. It's half the amount of time, right? If let's say you're going to do a month-long cleanse, well, then you're going to take 2 weeks to come back to normal. That's for sure. It's always, you know, half as much. And so I don't tell people that until we're like already more than halfway in.
Right.
Then we have that conversation so that because then I got them. They're hooked in. They can't go back. They're already too far in. And then what's cool about the way we do it, especially, with the 2 weeks of when we really prep them for the water fast, is by the time they get to that day 15 where they're going to go on water, they're already really in because they've already spent 15 days working on themselves. And it's not that much of a jump to go that next little step. So the preparation is very key. Once you come out of it, let's say you did a week-long water fast and you did a 2-week-long cleanse, you're going to take, 10, 11 days to come back out of that. You come in slow, just the way you went in. So you go back to liquids, maybe go to coconut water and juices. And then step by step, you go, okay, let me have a salad after 2 to 3 days. Then after that, you're like, okay, I'm going to have some avocado, and you just come back slowly and you ease back into it. And what I like about those messaging services, the reason why I brought that up is because I'm still there with them on day 25, even though the thing was really ended on day 21. Well, no, it's day 25. So we're still together right now. And our cleanse ended, where are we at? This is May. Our cleanse ended in beginning or end of March.
Oh, wow. So that's like a long, that's really wild.
So we're still in touch, because some people went really far and, it took them a while to come back out. So we were just there every day. Like, hey, don't go, don't have any cooked food. Don't have any bread. You got to just give it another 3 days and you go to this instead, that kind of stuff.
Now, are there any other elements or things that you suggest or recommend, or books or things like that to kind of some guidelines for people to go, and then also kind of the things that you offer as well in the services of adding your expertise and your guidance and your community and your accountability systems that you built? If you could share with our listeners some of those things, I think that'd be really valuable, because I know there's people sitting there going, I need to do this. How do I do this? When can I do the next? I can do a cleanse, or I can do a fast with David Wolfe. That sounds pretty exciting.
It's really fun. It's so cool. There's, the 2 key books, these books, and these are Woody Harrelson's favorite books, by the way. I just want to throw that in there because he buys them by the case still today, which is Rational Fasting and the Mucusless Diet Healing System by Arnold Ehret. Those 2 books, Rational Fasting and the Mucusless Diet Healing System. You read those books, you're going to be darn inspired, especially if you are fasting. You can't believe how much more powerful a fast becomes when you're reading about it while you're doing it. There's, of course, Paul Bragg's books, The Miracle of Fasting. And then we unearthed that when I was in Edmonton. And we were there I think I was already into the water fast. Maybe I was heading into a water fast. And I went over to a friend's place. And all of a sudden she comes out with these Paul Bragg little booklets. They go for like $300 on the internet. You can't find them. And she just gave them to us.
Wow.
And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to read this. So, I'm reading these during the fast. Here's one of them right here. This is called New Science of Health for Peace of Mind and the Prolongation of Life. That was one of them that we found.
Whoa, that's epic.
So epic. And in it, he starts talking about stuff that you're just like, oh, this, I got to this passage right here. And here he talks about when you're doing cleansing, and when you're working on yourself, you want to get to mountaintops. And why are mountaintops important? And this is something that comes down to the grounding and negative ion thing. Another thing about negative ions is they concentrate more at the tip. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So when you get to the top of that mountain ridge, there's more negative ions there because it's a point. Right? Just like if I had a needle and I was sticking it up like this, and the other part was in the ground, the electrons are not evenly spaced on that needle. They're actually more concentrated at the tip. That's the idea of a lightning rod or grounding rod. And so that was one of the things that was in here. And I was like, oh, that, and just led me down this whole amazing experience in my mind of like being in Peru and going to the mountaintops with the native people, and they call them the Apus. They have this thing about the mountaintops that they're like gods. And all of a sudden I had this piece, and then I had the electrical medicine piece, and then I had the shamans from Machu Picchu piece, and it was like all you put that stuff together, you get inspired, man.
It's so funny because I'm doing alternate fasting right now and getting lots of sun into the system. And I'm here in Sedona, of course, the vortexes, and being up every morning and every evening. I'm on the top of one of these mountains meditating with the sun shining and everything. And It's a transformative experience where you just feel connected with everything. It's like you're in the universal Wi-Fi signal, if you will.
Yes.
That's beautiful. That's beautifully said. So how do people find out more about you and where you're going and some of these things that you're offering? Can you please open it up and share your wisdom where they can find more about your schedule whenever that starts up again, and on how to access maybe some of the offerings that you have for our listeners?
Awesome. Well, one thing I probably will not do for a while is get back on the road again like the old days. I mean, 26 years straight is crazy. That puts me in a category very few people. And I've been traveling since I was a little baby, because we used to fly all over the world as kids. And it's just, I think I'm good. I think I'm gonna let that go. So the live events, you'd be lucky to catch me on a real live event. More likely it's going to be an internet thing. But one of the things that I like to do is just direct people to my main hub, which is my website, davidwolfe.com. And from there, so much stuff is coming out of there. DAVIDWOLFE. So my name has an E at the end, the British spelling. And then from there, you can track me down on Instagram, David Avocado Wolfe on Instagram, David Avocado Wolfe on Facebook. And then because I'm not into censorship and what's going on these days, I'm really guiding everybody over to a platform that I've been using for years. I've been on Telegram Messenger for years. And that's an encrypted platform originally created by a Russian dissident named Pavel Durov, who had his social media site stolen by Putin. He fled the country and started Telegram in London. Most of the users of Telegram are Russians, actually. I mean, now they have 400 million users worldwide. It's a massive thing. But I guide people there because there's no algorithm, there's no censorship. I can just say whatever the heck I want on my daily news feed. So I run a daily news feed there that's also under David Avocado Wolfe. But if you get to my sites or my YouTube or something, you'll get directed there. And my YouTube is the best day ever. It's still hard to find me. YouTube actually, I just do want to put this out there because I want to take a little jab at them, actually an uppercut. They deleted my page with no strikes, no warnings, and no real anything.
When was this?
This was in 2017.
Wow.
So I have a little 10 years of work, a whole history of stuff. They just deleted it. So, with there was no strikes, no warnings, no nothing. They just deleted it and they said, we're not letting you appeal it. And I was like, this is crazy. And people are like, why didn't you sue them? It's like, it's because it wasn't worth it for me at that time because I was more big on Facebook and I was more over there. And they saw me come into YouTube and they're like, forget it. Now YouTube has descended into total censorship and is basically they're ruining their platform. And now we're over on Telegram Messenger. But I do have a little site back on YouTube just to direct people away from YouTube, essentially, to Telegram Messenger. And that's if you need like video instructions of how to get on Telegram Messenger, it's there on YouTube.
Beautifully said. And before we wrap up, because I know your time is always a factor we're fighting against, it seems, in these interviews. Any insights or messages that you would like to share with our listeners? Something that's I would call straight from heart, straight from spirit, straight from the transmission that you always carry with you.
Well, you know me as good as anybody, and my phrase that I've had since I was probably 15 years old, as far as I can trace it back, is today is the best day ever. Today is the best day ever. Today is all we got, and it better be the best day ever. So no matter what your situation is, like my cousin, I can't get to him. We grew up together. We spent every day together and every summer together, and he's in the hospital and he's in San Diego. I can't get there. But it can still be the best day ever. And I'm out there working in the yard. I'm connecting with him through my heart, and I'm just sending him vibrations. And I can feel him, and I was like, he's getting better. He's getting better. And you know what he is? I just heard from my mom, he's getting better. And I was like, wow, that's the power of the best day ever. No matter what the situation is, no matter what the crisis is, no matter how bad it looks, there's always something inside that can flip it and flip that script into the best ever of all time.
Beautifully said. And, I just want to thank you. You're probably one of the most inspiring, positive, uplifting speakers of our time. And obviously you set a trend. You're the gold standard for people inside our industry. And I'm just very grateful that you were gracious enough to spend a little over an hour with our listeners, and I know they're gonna lap up this information, and I encourage them to connect. All the show notes will be in here, and all the connections and all the little micro mentions that David throws out. There's always like a treasure trove of great ideas and information and tidbits that can transform your life. So please go through some of those references, because every one of them is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So thanks so much for joining us today, David. I mean, it's been an honor for me. It's so great to catch up. I'm glad that you got a little bit of time for yourself with kind of the oddness of all this. Beautifully done and beautifully said.
I needed an excuse to get off the road, and this was it. I'm so elated. And by the way, I do want to just throw a thumbs up for your products, bro. Really good job. You guys sent me a bunch of your samples, and I was like, oh my God, I already take your products. You know, that's how much I love your enzymes and just what you're doing. So I do want to just, to all your listeners out there, just confirm that your stuff is next level, and really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, David. Really appreciate having you on here, and hopefully we'll get you back again soon.
Right on. Cool. Thanks, bro. Cheers.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip. Turn cultured foods into superfoods. Raw fermented foods like sauerkraut and low sugar, live yogurt can be good for you, but rarely have enough of the right probiotic strains for therapeutic benefit. So here's a way that you can turn them into superfoods. What I do is I get some raw sauerkraut or a healthy yogurt. Ideally, it's grass-fed or coconut-based, and you can empty 3 caps of P3OM into a container and mix it up thoroughly. Leave it at room temperature for a couple of hours before putting it back into the fridge. And what's going to happen is these probiotic levels will be multiplied. In fact, it doubles every 20 minutes. And then what you're going to get is you're going to have a food with strong proteolytic activity. To learn more about P3OM and why its patented strains make it the strongest probiotic available, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.